Back from the dead.
Hello to my Ghost Girl family. It is yours truly, Crystal. I'm very excited for today, but also very nervous because I'm sharing a new side of me that I haven't. This is the rebirth side of me, the phoenix out of the ashes side of me. And I've gone back and forth trying to decide if I'm ready to be vulnerable. And I feel like the time is now. So first of all, this is the Ghost Girl Diaries podcast, and this is a paranormal podcast for those of you that are brave enough to join the circle. So welcome. Also, really great news, Kat will be back in next week with me. She'll be doing her first podcast back. We are very excited about that. Now, I talked about this previously, which is there's going to be a few podcasts that I come in by myself. And the reason for that is I went through a lot in 2022. I really have just been through a lot in general since about 2018. And I feel like I'd be doing a disservice by not sharing the paranormal experiences that I've had on the other side. And I thought to myself, if I start this series and I start talking about the other side in essentially a way that I never did, where do I even begin? Where do I even start? Because I need to have some sort of a little bit of a preface, a preface, if you will, for, so that you guys understand the full enchilada, what I'm trying to explain, and where do I start? And I think I should really start with this statement. As you know, if you've been following me for a long time, I have a lot of new fans, new followers on the, my goth influencer side, and I love you guys so much. You're so amazing. I love the community that we're building together. My origins with paranormal, I've always been into paranormal. I did it in high school, and then I was cast for a series on Travel Channel in 2011, and that projected me forward with my paranormal career in paranormal production and film. And I've worked for several really big networks, several really amazing studio companies. I really gained a lot of knowledge under my belt on the film perspective, and I've also won several awards as a filmmaker, documentarian, director, and producer. I'm very proud of the filmmaking work that I've done. So in other words, my background in paranormal is extensive, right? Like I've always had one foot in this realm and one foot in the other. And when my mom crossed over in such a traumatic, tragic way in 2022, I really had no idea what was in store for me, that I was about to have another level up. You could say it in my spirituality. You could say it's spirituality. You could say it's spiritualism. But I don't really even think of it that way, to be honest. I think of it in the sense of my mom is now deceased with my father, and they crossed over. And they communicate with me just as much there as they do when they were alive. I was very close with my mom. I'm going to get choked up. I was an only child. I've talked about this before. My mom and I were best friends. She's a beautiful, amazing soul, and she is now running my spirit team on the other side. And it's weird because I want to say I'm sad she's gone, but I communicate with her constantly. I don't want to say nightly, but constantly. And sorry, I'm getting choked up. I'm hoping that by sharing these stories and sharing these experiences with all of you, even people that are new along the way, that it will help someone. If I even help someone heal from a traumatic death, or it doesn't even have to be traumatic, just understanding the other side exists, I'm hoping that that will help somebody out there by me sharing my story and sharing my experiences. And I also want to start by saying, like, I don't expect you to believe what I'm saying. I don't care if you believe what I'm saying. I'm not trying to force anyone to believe what I'm saying. It's interesting, like a confirmation noise. That's not why I'm here. I'm not trying to force you into my beliefs and what I've experienced. I'm just here to share with you what I experienced, and you can take with it what you will. I think that you guys know me by now after all these years that I am a non-bullshitter. I tell you how it is. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I'm going to approach this new version of myself the same way. So I want to back up just a little bit so that you can kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from. So obviously I've always been involved with paranormal my whole life. My aunt's house was extremely haunted. If you did purchase my book, you know that. By the way, I do have signed copies now available at crystalleandra.com. I will ship the signed copies to you after purchase. I grew up in a haunted house with my aunt. I grew up in a family where paranormal just was. My mom's family is extremely indigenous. My grandmother was straight off the reservations in Oklahoma, Cherokee. I am registered with my tribe. So spirituality, the other side, knowing the other side existed was honestly, I feel very lucky because my family always, you were never discredited in the household, if that makes sense. My aunt believed that she was, a witch from Salem. She collected witch stuff. That's my mother's sister. She had witches all over her house. I know if you've heard my podcast with my mom before she died, she talked about me having the witch's mark, which only a couple of us in the family have it. It's claimed that in my family, if you have the witch's mark, it means that you're extremely connected to the other side. So I've always had that door open, 1 foot in and 1 foot out, experiencing it growing up. There was never a question in my mind that ghosts or the other side don't exist, because I experienced it my whole life. This is the thing with skeptics is a lot of people are like, oh, well, how are you going to convince me I'm a skeptic? I don't really care if you're a skeptic. I think that it's going to take that experience that you have yourself for you to understand definitively, I had a paranormal experience. It exists, period. I cannot sit here and convince you. It's something you have to experience yourself. And if it's something you've never experienced, it's probably because you're scared and you're putting a filter on deep down and you don't want to experience it, so therefore you won't. Which we can deep dive into that later, but that's not really what this is about. So I started ghost hunting in high school, very amateurish, started taking it more serious in my 20s. Obviously, then I was cast for a paranormal show in 2011. And I'm a professional filmmaker and I'm obsessed with the other side and I want to continue that. My ultimate dream and goal in life is to make Ghost Girl Diaries into a television series. But I didn't know where it was going to go from there. 2018, I had a really rough year. And I talk about this in my book. I was in a really tough marriage. I was married to someone that had severe PTSD from the military. It was untreated. He had a traumatic brain injury from the military. And he was unmedicated, undiagnosed. I was in the process of forcing him into treatment, essentially, with the VA to get him help because he was not right. He was not right. He was having psychosis and just all kinds of issues. And got him help. And then the marriage was falling apart at the same time. And my mom started to get sick in 2018. She was having some health issues. And whatever that perfect storm was, it triggered a massive spiritual awakening within me. I don't really know how to explain it. I think that I was surrounded by a lot of chaos, with my spouse cheating on me, having bipolar, severe bipolar. When you have severe bipolar and you're not medicated, you have a lot of problems. You go into these phases that are called mania and manic. He would disappear for days at a time. Of course, I was stressed and worried. He wrecked one of our cars. Like, there was just a lot of chaos going on, and I was constantly having to essentially be his caretaker and pick up the pieces, simultaneously forcing him into treatment with the VA, making his appointments. I just had a lot going on. My mom was sick. I was having to take her to her appointments, and it triggered a spiritual awakening. And I realized when this was all this chaos was happening, that I had a lot of stuff that I needed to heal within me. And I was just realizing I had triggers and everything you can think of. I grew up with a terrible stepmom since I was 8 years old, so I was harboring anger and energy from that. I grew up with a very, very dysfunctional family. I was the black sheep of the family, and I was carrying a lot of negative energy from that. And I started doing therapy again. I've always promoted therapy, and I was doing a lot of research on the internet is how this happened. And all I knew was this external chaos is happening in my life. My marriage is dissolving. I'm about ready to go through a divorce. So how do I fix, the only person I'm really in control of at the end of the day is myself. I realized I was carrying around a lot of baggage from just trauma from my life, because that's just what we have as humans. No one's an exception. Everyone's got some sort of form of trauma. And I found out what shadow work was. So, and that's going to, if that's something you want to talk about, I talk about shadow work a lot in my book. That's a big black hole, though, that you would have to, sort of research on your own. I've talked about it several times with Kat. Kat also did shadow work. But it's interesting because when you start healing the trauma inside, more trauma comes up. You have more stuff to heal and more stuff to heal. So, and it really never ends. When you've chosen the shadow work path, essentially what shadow work is, you are merging with your shadow self. So any triggers, anything that makes you angry, anything that makes you sad, when you say, the big example I always give is when people say, oh, I have emotional issues, or I get weird when people disconnect from me because I have abandonment issues. And then essentially you're putting that abandonment issue off onto your spouse or significant other. So rather than doing that, let's heal that side of us. Get to the root of the problem. How did that abandonment wound start, and how do we fix it and heal it? Essentially, you're saying, I'm carrying a lot of baggage around. I'm carrying a lot of hate, anxiety, anger, trauma. How do I heal it? And one thing after another, it just starts popping up. And you sort of head on by yourself. And I'm not going to lie, shadow work's tough. It can get really dark sometimes because you're realizing triggers and problems that you have in your mind and your body that you didn't realize you had. But you have to heal them as they pop up. Every time they pop up, you heal it, you heal it, you heal it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work. Once again, it never ends. I really want to say that a majority of my shadow work is done. After, 4 or 5 years, a majority of it's done. But you're still going to have little triggers that pop up. I still do to this day. Got to work on that. Got to heal that. Rather than sort of scooping it under the rug. So that was sort of the beginning of this spiritual side that I sort of started. So 2018 was where it started. And started going through deep healing, deep shadow work. I realized that all of and Kat had actually started at the same time, even though we didn't mean to start at the same time. It happened to work out that way. And it's interesting because the people in your life, whether it's family or friends, two things happen. Either people realize you're healing and they don't want to be around you anymore, and you lose a lot of people, or you trigger people to start healing themselves. And that's what really started happening in my life, was either half of the people wanted to heal and half of the people were triggered by my healing and didn't want anything to do with me, because, it's a very human thing to say, I'm comfortable sitting in my trauma. Blaming other people, victim mentality, oh, I was abused as a child by this person, so now I have all of these problems, and rather than fixing it, undoing the problem myself, because now I'm in control as an adult, I'm going to off-put those problems onto everyone else around me. So that was the start of it. Took me a long time to go through the healing journey, and I'm not perfect and no one is. And 2020, 2021, pandemic hit. That was really weird, and I was still doing pretty intense shadow work at that point. I kind of got to a point during 2020, 2021 where I realized I had healed a lot within me, and now I needed to heal the outside. I had so much stress from my marriage ending and living with someone with severe manic episodes for so long, my mom being sick, that I had almost weighed 300 pounds. I was pushing 300 pounds. I'm going to be honest, I stopped weighing myself at about 260 pounds. And I've always been an emotional eater. Everyone's got some sort of form of addiction, and mine was food. I learned as a kid when my parents would fight that I'd go to the fridge and foods would give me endorphins and it would make me feel better. So after 2020, 2021, I decided, okay, it's time to start exercising. And now that we've healed the inside, now we've got to heal the outside. So I shed the weight. And 2021, my mom got really sick. Well, it was really weird. I had a lot of deaths in the end of 2021. My uncle passed away unexpectedly. My dog passed away unexpectedly. There were several deaths in my family that happened unexpectedly. And then my mom got sick and she had to have surgery, and you guys know that story. And that was when this massive level up happened. And so now we're in current moment, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. My mom got an infection at the hospital, and they were not treating her correctly. She had to go in for a minor surgery. It was supposed to be a minor surgery. She ended up getting an infection. The infection went to her foot. The only way of survival was to amputate her foot, about the ankle down. It was horrible. It was malpractice for sure. Trust me, I tried to sue the hospital. I tried to do everything. And Nevada, they're so protected from the way the mafia set up the laws here. It was horrible. She had the procedure done where her foot was amputated. She's a tough bitch. And I was really concerned because she had the surgery on her birthday, which was December 17th. And she was healing really well. But she started seeing my aunt in the room with us. And my aunt had been dead for about 15 years. My aunt is her sister. Now, I've heard of this happening often when someone's getting ready to cross over. Their family will start surrounding them. And my mom started talking that my aunt was there guarding the room for her. Now, normally a person would be like, oh, that's beautiful, that's lovely, or you don't, which, I mean, obviously I should have been supportive. I was pissed. I was pissed off at my aunt. I remember being in the room with my mom and aunt, and I was yelling at my aunt. Like, I couldn't see her, obviously. She's on the other side. But I was pissed. I was pissed off. I was yelling at my aunt. I was like, why are you here? So I feel like that was them preparing me to know that something was about to happen. And my mom was laughing. When I'm sitting there in this room, screaming at my aunt, cussing her out, telling her to F off, get out of the room, go back home. And my mom's laughing because she's like, your aunt thinks you're hilarious. Like, we're both like rolling laughing. And my mom's not on pain, like she was on pain medication, but she wasn't like in a coma or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not questioning if she saw my aunt or not. She saw my aunt. My aunt was there for days. She stood by my mom for days. And so I thought we got out of the woods. My mom started having horrible, horrible pain, and this is when the horrible, tragic stuff started happening where I found out that my mom was not getting her pain medication, and after a severe amputation, you can only imagine the amount of pain that she was in. I found out that the nurse was stealing it. I reported the nurse. The nurse was removed from patient care. And on December 27th, The nurse snuck into my mom's room at 4 a.m. My mom FaceTimed me, so I saw and heard the whole thing. And the nurse injected my mom with a lethal dose of medication that my mom was allergic to, which ended up sending her into cardiac arrest and a stroke 2.5 days later. It was a horrible time in my life. My mom was conscious for those 2 days. They let her sit in the room gasping for air and would not let her see a doctor. And believe me when I say I was beating on every door in the hospital in Summerlin in Las Vegas. I was doing everything I could, and I couldn't get anyone to treat her or see her for help. It was the worst thing you could even imagine. It was horrible. It's horrible to watch. On December 28th, my mom was moved to the cardiac unit after I threw such a big fit, and they found out that because she was having previous heart problems that she was being monitored for a possible heart attack. No one would listen to me or believed me that she had been injected with this medication. She was calling the Nurse Hatchet. This woman murdered my mom on purpose, and she's probably at the hospital still doing it to other patients. I saw my mom last on the 28th of December. I was with her till nightfall. And then she was on oxygen, and the nurses asked me to leave because they said that she was in distress, and me hovering was probably not helping the situation. And then I received a phone call at about 4:14 in the morning on December 29th that she'd had a stroke and a heart attack. She was in the ICU. She was resuscitated, and she was resuscitated after 14 minutes. If you know anything about medical, you really shouldn't be unresponsive for more than 4 minutes or not breathing for more than 4 minutes, because you'll have brain damage, severe brain damage. So 14 minutes for them to resuscitate her is a nightmare. Processing. Sorry, I get some flashbacks sometimes. I went into the hospital the next day, so this was the 29th. She was in ICU. She was hooked up to every machine you could imagine, including a ventilator. At that time, she had an Indian doctor who's from India. He's a genius. He's a beautiful soul. And to this day, I think that he was an angel on earth. And I'm not just saying that in a form of a doctor. I think that my guides had someone down here to look human, who was here to help me process this as it happened, because his energy was not human. And of all people, I would know. He was an angel. And I'm not saying that even in a sense that he tried to save my mom, because he did. He was an actual angel in human form to help me through that process. And I mean that quite literally. His energy was of God. And if you even back up for just a minute, like, you know, you have to ask questions on how I feel about God and religion. I always believed something existed. I didn't know what. I am not a believer in organized religion, and that's because I don't like the Catholic Church. I don't like how churches, profit off of people's pain. Essentially, in order to get forgiven from God, you have to come here and repent. I think the whole thing is like a scam. And I think that in general, that's why a lot of people have turned their back on God and religion, is because of how scammy the system is set up. And I still feel that way. But it's interesting because as my mom was dying, and this person took her life, what are you left with? You are only left with your faith. And that's exactly where I was. And I'm not saying I'm a Bible thumper. I'm not saying I'm sitting here going to church. No, I'm not going to church. That's not even it. It's just that I knew there was a higher power that was enacting at that moment. And it's similar to paranormal. You're not going to know it until you experience it. So, my mother was in her body on December 29th. I was asking her to react. She was kicking her foot. She was moving her hand. I stayed with her every day for about 8 or 9 hours a day. And the night of December 29th, she came to me in a dream and told me she had left her body. That she had made the decision that she did not think her, and this is verbatim what she said. She did not think that her vessel was going to repair correctly, and that she was possibly making the decision to evacuate the vessel. She told me, and of course in my dream I'm like, do I unplug you? Do I take you off life support? Like, what am I supposed to do? And she's like, no, you don't make any rash decisions yet. Work with the doctor. Which is why I also think he was an angel. I think they were trying to save her. And she said, work with the doctor. Don't make any rash decisions. She said, you'll know when the time's right, but I'll come back and talk to you in a few days. I said, okay. I think that at that time, she was bouncing back and forth between being in her body and being out of her body. I think that she was checking in with her vessel to see if it was working or how it was functioning. And if it wasn't functioning, she'd leave the vessel for long periods of time. And it's interesting because she was on life support from December 29th until January 15th. And I knew she was not there. I knew she was not there. I sat with her every day for 8 or 9 hours at the hospital. I was the one approving the med team to run tests. It was interesting because they were like running tests, brain scans to see if she had brain activity. She did. She had brain activity. And she shouldn't have after 14 minutes, without oxygen. I had some really horrible ICU nurses though. I have a really bad taste in my mouth for nurses now. I'm trying to work on healing that. But I don't like medical professionals who think that they can play God, especially after what this one did to my mom, took her life. And a couple of the ICU nurses were saying very cold, cruel things to me like, you just need to get it over with and take her off life support. I think Rona, the pandemic, changed nurses, and I understand they were under a tremendous amount of stress while that was happening. But I had to look at these nurses and say, she is somebody. She means somebody to me. She's my mother. She may look like some, old person on a ventilator to you, but she's somebody. And I would shock them. I would also, and I was also scared to buck authority. Because last time I bucked authority, someone injected her with medication that put her in this position. It was a very delicate situation. Now, moving forward to the first week of January, she visited me again several times. And on January 7th, she came to me and she said, Crystal, it's not looking good. She said, I'm not in my body. I've hardly been in it. And she says, I don't think it's healing. And she said, I have to make a choice. I can either come home and be with Grandma and Aunt Jean, or I can choose to come back in that body and I will be a vegetable. Her father had severe brain cancer when she was a child, and he became a vegetable, so I knew that she wasn't going to make that choice, and I wouldn't want her to make that choice either. So I said, okay, in the dream, what do you want me to do? She said, you're going to end up taking me off life support. And she said, I'm telling you what to do. You're not the one making the decision. I am telling you, you're going to have to take me off of life support. And I said, okay, when? Do I go tomorrow? I don't know. She said, you'll know. You'll know when the time is right. Okay. I kept working with the doctor. The doctor was, once again, an angel. And I mean, I wish I could even explain angelic energy. I can't. It's the most beautiful energy. It's going to make me cry. His energy was like the most pure light. I just can't even. He radiated. There was something about him that glowed. I started seeing auras in people around that time as well. And he tried a few more days, and then he said on the 12th, we need to make a decision to go ahead and take her off of life support in the next few days. But you need to make sure your schedule's open and you're here, because once she's on room air and she's gasping, there's a chance that she's going to die. And I said, okay. So we made the decision to take her off of life support on January 15th, and she died on the 17th. So she was on room air for 2 days. And I was really pissed off at her because she ended up dying at like 9:30 at night when I had left. She died about an hour after I left. And I knew she was going to do that to me because she's a tough bitch. She's not going to there is no way in hell she's going to let her daughter sit there and watch her cross over. She did it when she was in a room alone and not even a single nurse was there. I had her on a do not resuscitate order at that point. And she's an asshole. Honestly, I've told her that. You're an asshole for doing that to me. I wanted to be there with you. Absolutely not. Miss Independent's going to do what she wants, and she went out exactly the way she wanted to. Now, the question is, did she go back in her body for the crossover part? No, she didn't. Was she there as her vessel was gasping? Yes, she was. She was surrounded by her guides. I'm going to cry again. How do I know this? They told me in dreams. I don't know what's going on. A lot of people are saying, you're psychic, you're a medium. I don't know. I don't really want to claim those titles right now. All I know is I have a direct line of communication to my guides and my mom and my dad. She was surrounded by her guides and her in a room full of about 10 people. And they stood around her body as it took its last breath. So, of course, getting that information, I was just beside myself for weeks. I was out of it, totally gone, totally checked out. In the meantime, I had hired several attorneys. I spent $100,000 to try and get her, get this rectified, tried to get the nurse in trouble. None of it worked. I went to all of the local news stations. No one would take the story because they were afraid I would, quote, create havoc in the community of Las Vegas, and no one would want to go to the ER, so they refused to air my story. So I did everything did everything I could. And so she died January 17th, and I was just gone, mentally gone. Around middle of February, so around Valentine's Day, I started having these prophetic dreams. I was waking up from, of course I was depressed. I had 6, 8 hours, 10 hours of sleep. And I was waking up feeling like I don't belong in this realm anymore. I felt like I was with my guides for 8, 10 hours a night. And I did not belong on earth. I would wake up, and I'm talking having these dreams that I'm with them every night. And I would wake up the next day back in this heavy meat sack of a human body. And I was pissed off. I was pissed off. I didn't want to be here. I was mad at the planet. I was mad at the sun. I was mad at the moon. I was mad at the stars. I was mad at this meat suit. I was like, if I am over there and I'm having these in-depth discussions with my guides, and I am remembering who my soul is, not the person I incarnated in. I remember my soul. Why do I have to keep coming back to this meat suit? This planet is dark. This planet is heavy. There is violence here. There is murder here. It's a dense, dark, heavy planet. Why do I have to keep coming back to my body? I don't want to. I remember who I am. You could say it was the beginning of a spiritual psychosis that started in mid-February of 2022. My guide, I have journals and journals and journals. I was calling Kat every day with like 4 hours of information of dreams I was having. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. And I mean, you can't remember that stuff. You know, like I was accessing my Akashic records. I remembered all of my past lives. I remembered who I was on the other side. I realized why I incarnated here. It was so much information just being thrown at me. My guides I would ask questions and they were telling me whatever I want to know. They'll tell me. I asked, why was she murdered? She wasn't supposed to be murdered. People are not supposed to be murdered. This is a planet that you incarnate with free will. You can do whatever you want, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to murder each other. She was not supposed to die via murder. What happens next? I've tried to get her justice on Earth. What happens? I can't hold this nurse accountable. She's probably at the hospital right now murdering other patients. What happens? Karma. That's what my guides said. They said that, and I don't know why, I'm forwarding the information to you. If you kill 5 people or less, so 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, you can make up for that with another karmic incarnation. You have to come back on a karmic contract. If you are someone that's a serial killer or John Wayne Gacy, and you go home after you've done this tremendous amount of horrible killing animals and kids and humans, whatever, your energy will be destroyed, is what they said. Because I was walking around with tremendous guilt. Not only was I trying to get justice for my mom and what happened to her, but this nurse is doing this to other families. How can I stop this person? They said, that's not for you. You are not in charge of karmatic justice. That is not for you to do. And they said that is why when you hired all of these attorneys and you spent all of this money and it fell through, this was not your path. Your path is not to serve her karma. We will take care of it when she returns home. And I said, okay. But that was a hard one to let go. Because if you've ever had, there's a rare few people out there that understand what it's like feeling someone being taken from you. You want to do whatever you can in your power to serve them justice. But my guides were like, that's not for you. And I had to accept it. And it took a year for me to accept that. My mom is on the other side. My dad died a couple of months later. He couldn't handle the stress of her death and surrounding what happened. He ended up having a heart attack and died. I was in shock again. Can't believe I'm burying my parents back to back. I'm an only child. I have no siblings to turn to for help. I'm on my own. My family on my dad's side absolutely hates me. They're racist from the South, and they don't like that I'm indigenous, so they don't want anything to do with me. And my mom's side of the family is completely dysfunctional and drug-riddled because they have trauma from my indigenous history. So I have no one. I'm by myself dealing with the fact both my parents just died, and I'm just a mess. Spiritual psychosis takes over because I'm more happy in the other realm than I am here. I was such a mess, I stopped driving for about 6 to 8 months. I did not trust myself driving on the road. So I stopped driving. I had groceries delivered. I had friends that brought groceries over. People would shop for me. I didn't leave the house for about 8 months. I was gone. Mentally, I was gone. I ordered everything from Amazon, Uber Eats. I did not leave the house because it was not... Everything triggered me outside of this house. Everything. If someone said the wrong thing to me, I remember I finally went out of the house one day to go shopping. I think I was at Target. All the stress that I had endured, I lost all of my hair. And I wore a wig that day. And I'm going to be honest, I was gone. So I don't know if the wig was on crooked. It was a bang wig. I don't know. But these black girls were making fun of me in Target because my wig looked bad and I had no makeup. I looked like a scrub. I looked like a scrub. You wouldn't have recognized me. I was swollen not from eating. I was hardly eating. I was swollen from just traveling to the other side every night, not eating, stress. I was just totally and when these black girls started making fun of me, I came home that day and thought about offing myself. Because I was like, now take in mind, they didn't know what I was going through. My wig was probably crooked. It was probably looked bad, whatever. They didn't know what I was going through. But that was like the icing on the cake where I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going home with my mom and dad. I don't need to be here anymore. I'm not functioning as it is. And I had a plan. I had a plan to cross over. And that was when the spirituality stuff started hitting hard. Really, really, really hard. My guides were like, absolutely not. You're not doing this. You have come so far. We are sorry she was killed. This was not supposed to happen. But it is a risk you take when incarnating on the planet because this planet is so bad. It is a risk everyone takes. And yes, this is a setback. We were not expecting this, but you have to heal through this because you have an important job to do. And I was pissed. I was really pissed off at my guides. I would have these vivid dreams of being with them at night, and I was yelling at them, cussing them out, screaming at them. Seriously. Dead serious. I was telling them, like, I'm coming home. I don't care what you think. I've made my decision up. And that's when this really intense dream work with them started. They were like, we're forcing you into understanding why you incarnated. You have to learn about this bigger picture, and you have to talk about it, and you have to teach people about it. So I started trying to control those urges to cross over. I've always had dark thoughts. I had a friend that, committed suicide when I was 13. That was what started my alt-goth phase. I've always dealt better with the other side than I do the living, so I've always been a very dark person. Which is kind of funny. I don't think people realize how dark I am. Because they see me on the outside like, oh, she's blonde and she likes fashion and she does her hair and she looks like, oh, she's a goth Barbie. That's like the title you guys give me, and it's so sweet and I love you, but I am dark inside. And I don't mean that I'm thinking about unaliving myself all the time. I am fascinated with death. I am fascinated with death. I am fascinated with the other side, and it is something that I've hidden for a long time. Like, obviously, I've got to be into something weird because I've done paranormal for years, right? Oh, but I haven't let you guys in enough to know how dark I am. And so my guides were like, okay, we have to force you you have to unlock your Akashic records. We have to let you access your records. We have to let you understand who you are and how you're connected to the other side. And that's what started happening. And that pulled me out of the dark place that I was in, because I realized that when you have an incarnation, it is a gift. And I chose to come here. And so did all of you. And if you are in my community listening to this or watching it right now, there is a 100% chance that we know each other on the other side. Our energy vibes, and your vibes actually do attract your tribe. So this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. Spiritual psychosis started happening. They started teaching me things. I had past lives in Atlantis, past life, very, very deep, vivid lives from other places. Remembering other people. I talk about Christian in the book. Christian's a very big, big part of my story. He was with me every night that my mom was crossing over. And I started coming out of this. I'm still having prophetic dreams. It's not every night, but I'm still in full communication with my guides. It's just totally changed me, changed my perspective. So I have a lot of things to say to you guys. The two biggest things I want you to take away from this are: we choose to come here. We choose to incarnate here. We choose our circles. We choose our family, our names, our friends. We also choose when we die. We write in several exit points in our life, and at that moment, you get to decide if you go or not. If you are not ready and you have not completed your mission, whatever that is, you don't go. It's very simple. If you have completed your mission, you leave. You leave your vessel. You do not feel pain when you die. It doesn't matter what kind of death you have. It could be the worst death you could experience in your life. You are removed from your body before you die. Period. No questions about it. And I asked my guides why. Why don't like, if you're incarnating in this meat suit, don't you want to experience the death part? Is that my dark side coming out? I don't know. Maybe. But they say, no, you're not incarnating to experience pain. Like, sure, you have heartache. You know, you get sad. Like, you have that kind of pain. You have human emotions. But you don't incarnate to experience, like, getting eaten alive or a vicious death. Or you're not supposed to experience that. And I said, well, I'm confused. Because I said, you know, some people, like even my mom, like when she was on her last few days, she was in a way gasping for air, right? And I said, so how was she not feeling that? She wasn't experiencing it? And they said, the vessel has to die. But that doesn't mean your mom's in there feeling it. She's not in there feeling it. She's not like dying like that. The what you're seeing on the outside is the vessel dying. That doesn't mean you're experiencing it. You've already left your body. It's long gone. It's long gone. I was like, wow, that's legit. So when I started coming out of this, what I'm saying is I felt like I was living on the other side for about 8 months, literally. I feel like I was not in my body from like February till about August of 2022. So August, I started coming out of it, gathered all this information, started driving again. I was obviously cast for the Motionless in White video. I did the Tubi documentary in June. When that happened, I was flown out and I was taken care of because I knew I was not going to be able to drive to Los Angeles. I was really scared to drive to Los Angeles for the Motionless in White video shoot for Werewolf because I hadn't driven in months. But I was very safe. It went great. And then I started to ask my guides in dreams. I said, how do I explain this stuff to people? Like, you want me to share my experiences with my followers. You want me to tell them this stuff. Is there a better way or an easier way for me to share this? Because this is like crazy. This is going to sound crazy. Like the amount of information I have, like it is going to make me sound like I'm talking out of my ass. How am I going to share this? Like, is there an example that a book I can read, a book I can share with the audience and tell them, here's similar information. And this was October. This is about October. So probably the first week of October. This is after the Motionless in White shoot. And I said, so how do I tell them, what do I say? And they said, one name. My guides said one name in my dream. And I had never heard of this person before this. They said the name Dolores Cannon. So I woke up the next day. I remembered that, because I have these dreams and I remember everything. I woke up the next day, I was like, Dolores Cannon, okay, like when I have time, like I'll like look it up. I have no clue who this is, no clue what's going on. So finally I get some time to look up whoever this person is. I have no clue who Dolores Cannon is. I have a bunch of notes here because if you've never heard of her, this is a really good person to start sort of researching because this is a lot of same exact information. Mom told me, I wish you guys could experience what I experience. I wish you could have your family from the other side interact with you the way I do. Because you'd not fear death. You would not fear the other side. You wouldn't fear interacting with entities or anything. It's just, what I've experienced has just changed my whole perspective on paranormal. Like, it's not as easy. My mom's not here. Like, I can't, like, I can't be like, hey, Mom, phone call. You know, I'm calling you, pick up the damn phone. But it's almost as easy. If I meditate before sleep and I say, God, or even out loud, guides, connect with me, talk to me. Tell Mom I want to talk to her. Tell Christian I want to talk to him. That night, I'm in a room hanging out with my mom. I can't tell you how many dreams I've had with her. where we're shopping. Or on the other side, we're shopping at some of our favorite stores. And I'm walking with her through these stores. I'm like, oh my God, I remember this store. I miss shopping over here. I miss this store. She takes me to my favorite restaurants on the other side. Like, it's crazy. I wish you guys could access this. I think it's possible for anyone to access it. You just can't be afraid. Dolores Cannon, she was a hypnotist specializing in past life regression, and she did work on past life regression for about 50 years. And she did thousands and thousands of past life regressions, which I feel like gives her even more credibility. She has written countless books. I have so many of them. I bought some of her books. I talked about it I'm sure you've seen me post about them a few times. She is not a psychic. She is not a medium. She gathered all of this information by doing hypnotist work. Hypnotherapy, literally past life regressions with all these people. And she recorded all of them. And she has the exact same information that I was given in 2022. So if you feel like starting a rabbit hole, I think that you'll be fascinated with it. She talks about using the quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is the QHHT. And she literally studied people all over the world. People would come out as aliens, come out as past life in Egypt, past life in Atlantis. They would tell her in spirit guide form what happened on the planet's surface and why certain catastrophes happened. Dolores Cannon, so she was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1931, where she lived and grew up. And she did die, I think in 2014 was when she died, or somewhere around that era. But in the 1960s, she started doing hypnosis for people that needed like weight loss or to stop smoking. And then got introduced to the reincarnation side in 1968. When her and her husband were asked by the doctors at a naval base that was stationed in Texas to help one of their patients with a past life regression and hypnosis, and that's where it started. This woman suffered from a nervous eating disorder, and she was extremely obese, had really bad health issues like blood pressure and even kidney problems. And they were able to solve all this after the past life regression. So that was sort of where her path started. It's amazing. She's amazing. And I felt really, really validated when I started going down the rabbit hole of her stuff, because she was saying the same things, exact same things my guides and my mom was saying. She talks about reincarnation, what we do before we're here on this planet, who we are before we're here on this planet. I personally, I've talked about this before, I never thought like I was from here. I actually made my mom get a DNA test when I was younger because I was convinced I was not her kid. Not hers necessarily, like just human. I swore up and down I just wasn't human. And I mean, I'd done that since I was little, and she thought I was stupid, and she did get a DNA test, and she was my mom, by the way, like, sorry mom, listening up there. But that's my point, is like, I always felt like I wasn't from here, and I know a lot of you feel the same. And even when I started doing shadow work, I got into numerology, I got into star seeds. You should start looking up some star seeds, because I'd like to do a podcast on that. Star seeds are essentially you're incarnating as a star seed, so you're a very, very old soul, but you have to look into star seeds and see which one you resonate with. I am a Lyran. It's been confirmed. I'm from Lyra. I've seen my Akashic records. Kat is also Lyran. We're both Lyrans. But it's all this stuff that she speaks about, Dolores Cannon, and I just felt really good finding a source. So I didn't feel like I was going crazy, because that's something with spiritual psychosis. Like when you're living on the other side, like I was in dream state for every night, I was miserable coming back to Earth. I was miserable being here. Now, going back to Dolores Cannon, she even talks about like the Bible, how there's pieces of the Bible missing, and it was manipulated essentially for that time period for women to sort of follow in men's footsteps. And she just went all over the world and basically studied the subconscious of human and recorded all of these. And it's just fascinating. She even says that she claims that she contacted Nostradamus through one of her past life regressions. And the information is so legit. It is so good. She talks about UFOs. She talks about extraterrestrials. She talks about other planets. She talks about how there is no hell. Hell doesn't exist. But that this earth is the closest thing to hell that you can ever access, because we have free will and people do kill each other, and anything you think of that happens in hell can happen right here. She talks about karmatic debt, which my mom's talked about it. My guides have talked about it. So essentially, anyone from your past, if you have problems with someone from your past, if you don't let that go, whether it was someone who abused you, hurt you, an ex-friend, an ex-coworker, if you hold on to that person and harbor that energy, you will have to somehow pay off that karmic debt with that person in the next life. And I was like, ew, no. So my mom had a choice. They told me in the dream that she could reincarnate with her murderer to pay off the karmic debt. My mother chose to expunge the contract. And this woman will probably be, what did they call it? I said, what happens to people like John Wayne Gacy? They're destroyed. Back to Dolores Cannon. The mid-'80s is when she started talking about the UFOs, the extraterrestrials. She has some really interesting theories, though, that I haven't heard of from my guides. Like, she talks about, there's a book called The Custodians and the Guardians. And she talks about there was the Greys or the ET races. They were dying off because they could no longer reproduce. And that was how humans started. She has some really fascinating theories. I'm not saying that you need to believe it all, but I think that if you really listen to her, you would find her fascinating. I don't know, to me, she makes more sense than any religion ever has to me. She also talks about something that I really want to touch base on right now, which is the 3 waves of volunteers. Now, remember when I went through my first spiritual awakening in 2018 and I was doing shadow work, that was when I also discovered numerology and star seeds. Star seeds are healers. Star seeds are very old souls that incarnate. You can be a Pleiadian. You can be an Arcturian. A lot of my friends are Pleiadians. My mom is a Pleiadian. I'm a Lyran. Lyrans are very, very rare. They don't like to incarnate because they're very old souls and they only come here for a very, very specific reason. But she talks about the 3 waves of volunteers, and she basically talks about how there was a huge catastrophe that happened, obviously with the World War, the nuclear bomb going off, and that the extraterrestrial civilizations were very concerned for the well-being of this planet. And she said that a call went out in the universe that asked for volunteers to come in. They are not allowed to manipulate the planet and what happens to the planet on the outside, but they can manipulate it from the inside, which means the star seeds are born here. We incarnate, and we are light workers, and we bring healing to the planet from the inside. So she talks about the 3 waves of volunteers. This also can go into things like twin flames, high-level soulmates. You incarnate together for a purpose. So the 3 waves of volunteers, I believe I'm part of the 2nd wave, just for my age range. And these waves were essentially sent here to bring literal peace on earth, because there's so much hate and anger, and they are talking about right now, there's like this mass awakening happening. More people are turning to spirituality or even new age practices than ever before, if that includes tarot, what have you, all of that witchy stuff. That's all part of the new age movement, and more people are turning to that and turning their back on things like organized religion, like the church, Catholicism, Christianity. So there's another book that she talks about with, the 3 waves of volunteers, and this occurred after, Hiroshima, 1945. I think my mom was a part of the wave 1. My mother, I used to think I was an older soul than her. That is not true. She is ancient. She's an ancient Palladian. And she was part of group 1. I'm part of group 2. It says the second wave is a part of antennas energy, and you'll have to look up this stuff if you're interested. And this is why I'm telling you, because I really think you're going to love it. Honestly, I think that if it makes sense to me, it's going to make sense to you. So the second wave is essentially antennas, and anywhere they go in, they just bring light. Any people they attract, they just bring light. She did all these amazing books. I'm so excited to even read more. There are endless amounts. I mean, I binged every video of her on YouTube. I was excited. I finally felt like everything made sense when I found her. And not even it was healing. You know what I mean? Healing from my mother's death, my dad's death. I needed an explanation. I needed a reason to what was going on and why I was experiencing the other side so vividly. My father passed away in June of 2022, early June, and I did not get a visitation from him for like a month. I was very, very worried because my guides were not mentioning anything and I was seeing them every night. My mom wasn't mentioning anything and I was seeing her every night. And he was so sick when he died, they had to place him in what is like a hospital on the other side. And that is a place that only certain souls go to sort of cocoon and heal until you're ready. I was taken to the hospital on the other side several times. I want to talk about that and my experience with that in another podcast. And only people with severe mental illnesses, extreme tragic deaths or suffering lives. My dad had a very hard life, which is why I want to talk about that in a separate podcast. He was kept in that hospital on the other side from June 2022 when he died until December. He was finally released in December. Now to us, that's about 7 months. On the other side, time does not exist. Time does not exist. I don't know how to explain that to you. I don't know if it's because this planet is so heavy with dense energy and we're literally grounded by gravity. I don't know if that's why we experience time the way we do. But time on the other side does not exist. Also, my grandmother is there. My father's there. When you are on the other side, everyone looks like they're about 35 years old. You do not look old. You don't have wrinkles. You are permanently about 35 all the time. And I know this because I've seen my family. Now, it's interesting because like when Christian comes to see me, he looks like he's about 29 or 30. But I think he's showing me himself that way visually because that was about the age that he died. So I think if you die younger and you didn't get to the age that you're at, in order for you to recognize them, they stay at that age when they visit you. Now, Julia Cannon is Dolores' daughter, and she is still practicing, essentially, in her mother's line of work and continuing on her legacy. She's also doing books and Hypnosis Academy, which I think is really, really, really fascinating. I think that this is also a really good example of, you have someone like, we've talked about Teal Swan in the past, and once again, I'm going to say this. I agree with a lot of things Teal Swan says about communicating with your guides and communicating with the other side. But I don't like the ways that she likes to play God by making people pay $7,000, $10,000 to come to her retreat. And then in order to expunge your demons, she literally baptizes you and makes you feel like you're drowning underwater. That to me is on the verge of going into more organized religion from a spiritual perspective, and I don't like that at all. Because at that point, you're not necessarily using your gifts for good, you're using them in a bad way. I understand that you need to make money off of this at some point, but I don't think you're going about it the right way. It's a little culty to me, and I think if you're looking for an opposition of a really better example of someone to look into and study, it's Dolores Cannon. It's amazing. She is amazing. And it's so real to me. it makes sense. It just makes sense. Even the ET stuff that she says, she talks about abductions with aliens, and that, a lot of people are scared to death of aliens, but we're only scared of aliens because the government has made us feel scared of aliens. They're not really here to harm us and hurt us. Even when these abductions happen, it's not meant for harm and for pain. You really need to Benjer. It's fascinating. And this is a part of the awakening that everyone's going through. She also talks about some really interesting stuff with Nostradamus that I think you would love. She also talked about some more conspiracy theory side of stuff that you may not want to know, depending on where your stance is on if you trust the government or not. I don't personally. She says that, it's claimed that AIDS was originated from monkeys, but she believes after her hypnosis that it was deliberately spread by governments. It's the same with a lot of these illnesses, essentially, to control the masses, and also it puts big pharma in control of everyone's pocketbooks. She essentially calls it, instead of United States of America, it's the United States Corporation. Not just us, it's really all countries that are almost a corporation and controlling the masses. So I really find that also fascinating. Once again, it depends on where you fall with that. Nostradamus, she talks about him and him living in the 16th century and his spirit communicating with her through the other side. She has some really fascinating, amazing stuff. She even talks about dinosaurs, and when we find dinosaur bones or fossils, that it's not necessarily them from being extinction, it's an accidental parallel universe that's overlapping, and you've accidentally happened to find that in that moment in time. But she says there's a parallel universe, essentially, where dinosaurs still roam and still exist. They're just not on our dimension and our reality. And the last thing I want to mention is she talks about the new Earth. So she says there's two Earths, and the Earth has been splitting since I think she said it started around 2000, went heavier into 2014, and it's supposed to be complete next year of 2024. And it's essentially, if you are healed or you on a healing journey, you will go to the new Earth, which is a new dimension. And if you're still stuck in fear and trauma, that you will remain on the old Earth. It is a very individualistic journey that you will take on your own. Also, one is government controlled, one is not government controlled. My dog just walked in the office and I was like, excuse me? So the new Earth is really amazing to me. I also really believe in that, because if you're on TikTok and you see these mass awakenings happening, there's thousands of people meeting at Stonehenge, believing in spirituality. And I've seen so many people say, oh, I'm a Pleiadian starseed. And I love that people are just so open and ready to just be themselves and be authentic. Now, I'm kind of coming to the end of this podcast. I know what you're going to ask yourself. You're going to get worried and you're going to say, are you not going to talk about paranormal anymore? Are you not going to talk about haunted locations? No, I'm going to still talk about that stuff. I'm going to talk about everything. But this is really important to me because I fully experienced this when my mom died. Dolores Cannon even has another book out that's called The Council, and that's where she talks about the beings that are sort of in control. When you incarnate, you're never alone. You incarnate with, somewhere between 3 to 7 spirit guides, an angel that's always with you 24/7 in case something happens. And when you go home, you have a life review. It just makes sense to me. I'm not expecting anyone to believe what I'm saying. I'm not expecting you to vibe on my energetic level. But I am saying this is who I am now. And if you are not vibing with this energy, that's okay. My vibes will attract my tribe. I know what I experienced with my parents passing. I know that the visions and the things that I'm getting are real. And I am not going to hold back and not share them with you, because I think it's very important to understand that we are all here for a very specific purpose. I was at such a low when I didn't want to be alive anymore in 2022. And I remembered I had a reason to be here. And so do you. We all have a very specific purpose to be here. There's a lot of things that have been indoctrinated into our minds from such a low vibrating, low level society that we have, such as you have to work hard for your money. If you believe that, that is what it will be. I do believe in manifestation. I believe in the law of assumption. And I think that it is multi-generational trauma when you do not think that money can come to you freely and easily. The minute that you change your mind perspective and you truly believe it, you can't just say it, you have to truly believe it, money will flood to you easily and effortlessly. Money, a lot of people believe, oh, you're a millionaire, you're a billionaire, you had to work hard to get there. Oh, and now I'm salty. That's typical society. I'm mad at you because you're a billionaire. Look at these people that just died in this wreckage, right? Oh, I don't care. I don't care about their lives. They were billionaires. No one's going to miss billionaires. Okay. That's trauma, though. That's indoctrinated trauma. I don't really care that there were billionaires on there. It was sad that a 19-year-old lost his life. Anybody could be a billionaire. Anybody could be a millionaire. But society wants you to think like the Great Depression, that you have to work hard. The industrialization, the world of industrialization, you have to work hard for your money. That's not the case. That is not the case. Money will come to you freely and easily and effortlessly if that's what you believe. And it's not just believing, you have to make it happen. And a lot of these people don't realize that in order to be a millionaire, billionaire, you have to have multiple streams of income. But our society's been trained from the industrial age that you work a 9 to 5. You work a 9 to 5. Yeah, you're never going to be a millionaire by working for someone else. You have to learn to work for yourself. I don't know what that means. What's your passion? Stop neglecting your passion, right? You incarnated with some reason. I've talked about this in my book. My ex-boyfriend was a savant when it came to the guitar. He should have been a famous guitarist. He can hear one song for 1 second and play it back to you immediately. He's never taken a guitar lesson in his life. He completely abandoned that to go to work at a 9 to 5 job. That's going to be your first step to, and Dolores Cannon talks about this. The reason we incarnate is energy manipulation. We incarnate to manipulate energy around us. What creates the life that you want around you? I've had a lot of people get mad at me because I switched and I took a break from Ghost Girl Diaries and went to makeup and fashion, even though that was my first passion. But look at the life I'm creating now. I have all these brand deals. I'm getting free clothes. I'm getting free makeup from brands I love. I only work with brands that I love. I have created and manipulated the energy around me to create my reality. I have learned to alchemize and manifest my reality. And the only way you can do that is by following your gut and following your true passion. I don't know what that is. What have you always wanted to do your whole life? Do it. Make it happen. And I'm telling you, once you start putting even the little bit of effort in, which I've even done with Ghost Girl Diaries, look at the success I've had with that. The universe will start opening doors. But you have to follow your heart. You have to follow your true passion. And you have to break out of these horrible societal rules that have been created for us. Worrying and thinking about what other people think of you, that's rule 1. The new earth is here. Do we heal? Or do we sit in our trauma? Do we follow our passions and do what we want to do? And let me tell you too, I lost so many friends after my parents died, and I have the most beautiful friend circle that I've ever wanted. Rip up soul contracts that you don't need anymore. Rip up soul contracts that don't serve you anymore. I have people from my past that still stalk me and they are obsessed with what I'm doing and they want me to hate them and they want me to be triggered by them. I don't care. I've ripped those soul contracts up. I have no ill will or anger feelings towards anyone because I got a shock value with my mom realizing how short life is. Life isn't long, so you better live it starting now. You don't have much time left. It flies by. Next week, I will be coming in with Kat. I might do another solo podcast in between then on some fashion that I've been wanting to talk about. Kat's coming in and we're going to talk about a few things that we both love to welcome her back in. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to my video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and the podcast. Support us on everywhere that you can. This was a very vulnerable thing for me to come in with and talk about. And I'm really excited now that I was able to sort of bring this forth to you guys to just see a little piece of where it's going to kind of lead. My mom's death changed me. And you're probably going to see this new side of me, and I don't know if you're going to like it or not. But this is who I am now. And I love you guys, and I missed you, and I'm glad to be back. So let's make the best of it. Because once again, life's too short, right? And as always, we will catch you guys next time.
We're back from the dead. Back from the dead. Back from the dead.